Hey, Booker, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Thank you.
All right.
I saw a giraffe go by earlier. I requested that the giraffe.
Hey, John.
I can't see y'all though. I can't see anything y'all doing.
Booker, can you hear
I can
me?
hear you. Yes, he's been saying yes.
I can hear him.
Speakers aren't turned up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2,
Okay,
3.
I'm gonna mute again. Okay, now you can ask him.
Booker, give us a mic test.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Roger that. Thank you.
Those are the even issue. Can you?
I'm not seeing anything though. It looks very foggy.
Can you just hear us talking?
I can hear you talking, but I can see like vague lights in
They
the
don't use the
ceiling.
microphones because they're causing too much feedback.
Booker, let me ask you this question.
Sometimes
Can you
it's just
see
the one
us?
upstairs.
Sure.
No.
That's what he just said. He said, I can't.
I didn't hear him.
Yeah, we're hooking up the webcam.
This is Breeze.
Because they're gonna want to point to the. You're gonna want.
Yeah.
It's very hazy. I can see the lights on the ceiling, but that's it.
Hawaii.
Now we just need to take.
The right video input. That's me.
That's you.
Yep.
Now you can play it.
Much better.
You can see it.
You can
You do
wait,
it.
figure out who you.
Presenter mode. It'll make that one the big camera.
Okay, I don't need to see him. I need to see him. I got. Phoebe, I don't need to see you either. Alex, I don't need to see you.
Call people out like that. Listen, man, I want you to buy 5 water balloons to come on Friday.
Come on down. We're raising money for people who need it, so feel free to bomb away.
While we're riding around, we put in 5
One of that box. I can't seem to get a good grasp.
Yeah. Ah, you're right.
Everybody watching. Just slowly rock it back and forth.
You're like, we're on a cruise ship. Sorry you weren't invited.
No problem. I'm so sorry about that. Things happen. It's fine.
We got 5 minutes.
What do you think?
Anybody want water while we're here?
Wayne, you want a water? You want a water?
Yeah. We'll have five.
He's right behind you. Don't talk about it.
No more cultural sports, we're gonna get us. And we're back. And we're back. Just getting started. Fans. Wait. You're not fans. We're gonna unban you.
You guys ever see that stuff? About the investment disappearing, and now it's gone. Hi, Laura, so nice to meet you. Welcome. I came late to my own party here. I did not have to go far, and I'm still late.
This is like the third time we've had it. Hey, what's up? How are you?
You're Tom Six, Tom?
Yeah, I need to see him his wife. He had some college buddies come down for an annual visit. Four guys from up north. And so they all got it. They all got it.
Oh, that was it, what he was telling us about that he was gonna run an Airbnb,
Running an Airbnb, got COVID. No,
There you go.
Stay in a hotel.
Among other things,
Airbnb's
right?
bad.
I like it, they don't tell you, like, they're better.
Strong correlation between death and
Hey, Jim.
on record. I don't have it. There's probably a relatively good chance we could get it.
But they've made it, that's true.
Welcome there.
Good story today, Dave.
Which one was it?
Gee.
Yeah, the fizzling.
But it was a record year, so. So Healy's got that part. Need a pen?
It's November.
She,
Retiring.
so the state extended the drop program from 5 years to 8 years. So she was able to extend her retirement for at least another year.
Just remind me.
I was glad she should hear.
She is.
Thank you.
This would have been the month year. Yeah, that's how she's got it. That's a year now. Everyone on the call is on staff because they're not to the county system.
You have somebody in your waiting room.
That's probably Mike McGarry. He's on vacation, but he said he might call in. Or
Almost there.
What's that?
You have any magazines in your waiting room? I get my recipes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. expected a record year overall, 25.54 million, 9.5% over the 23.3 we had last year. As you can see from the far right column, some softening in Q4 or Q3, but Q4 of the fiscal year. Collectively, it was down about 5.5% for the quarter. Still seeing some of that softness as I'm looking at October STR numbers. I think PDP in October will also be down, but November seems to be trending up slightly. So hopefully we will see a little bit of a reversal of that. That being said, I think overall a very strong year. I think we all knew 2022 was a high water mark, and we all wondered if 23 would actually, live to beat that year. It did overall, but just beginning to see a little bit, I think, of the softening in that last quarter. One thing I'll just say about as we go forward, fourth quarter, October, November, December are always a little bit lower. That quarter represents 21%. Last year represented 21% of PDP collection, while first quarter, January, February, March represents about 30, even like 32%. So we have a lot of runway ahead of us and a lot of opportunity to see some reversals in the collection. So I'm, still going to be relatively bullish on 23, 24, at least matching, if not exceeding. Our budget for the next fiscal year is 27 million, and we're being pushed to be a little bit more aggressive because I think there were some accusations of sandbagging the last couple of years where our budget, our fiscal budget, was much lower than the actual collection. So I said, okay, well, if we are going to hit 25.5 million, then let's put in a 5 to 6% growth rate and see what happens. Well, we'll just have to see. I don't know if we'll. I think I would be happy at 26, but 27's in there as our budget. And as far as managing our budget, the big, 50% of the budget, a little less than 48% is marketing. So I'm holding funds. I'm holding some funds back in the marketing fund just in case. The rest of the funds I think will be fine on because they sort of self-correct as the year goes along. I think that's all I had to say about TDP. We
saw the same pattern as we do in May and June.
Okay.
With May going down and then June returning and then the rest of the summer. What do you think that means? Because that's always intrigued me. I understand what happened in July on, but why do you think May was down and June right the ship? I don't have any idea. I'm just curious.
Cool.
But why did
you're comparing the numbers are being compared to the month of the year prior. So
right.
Why May was down slightly, I don't know. I mean, it was practically flat. So, less than 2%. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
We saw the exact same pattern to do. We thought it was because Lions came last May.
Right.
So we fell off.
Maybe had a little bump
and it
there.
returned, and I don't think Lions broke through the county.
So
So I was just.
if they did, they should be driving them more often. We should
Yeah.
be using them in our features
That's
and
what I'm
like that.
saying. June, July, August, September, we all saw heat, we all saw this pattern, but that flip of June and May, I'm just.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
I don't.
Really, April was getting much of the teacher late,
Right.
and then
Right.
May falls off because it's in the cold.
but that's every year, that's my point,
Yeah.
I'm comparing to previous, it's not the overall.
There wasn't there wasn't anything
year.
unique about May, I don't think, from the prior year that I could see. And certainly June, there wasn't anything unique about it.
Yeah, I'm not talking about, the year, I'm talking about year over year.
Right.
That pattern.
Right, just for those months. Yeah.
So that would be good.
Yeah.
There's not in the green though.
Yeah.
Here.
All right. So, sir, that was all I really had. We did not get October STR yet, so we're still waiting on that. It'll be here next day or we talked about the budget. If you want to, I know you covered it at the last meeting. Yeah, why don't we take a look? I mean, obviously it was just the first month, so not a lot of, what happens in October. We get billed in October, late October for early November for things that hit. So, while marketing was running, you're not going to see a huge number there. The bigger numbers will happen in November, December for the fall campaign. So not much there. I'm going to cover beach under the beach committee. Yeah, do you want to do it now or do you want to wait until we get to the beach? Yes. And then capital, just some notes about capital. We had, so those of you who've been on the committee for a while remember the Palm Bay campground. That was about a $1.7 million project that was awarded. Those funds have been, basically the city of Palm Bay decided not to proceed forward with the project due to really high costs in terms of trying to accomplish what the original goal was there, which was to build about 60 RV spots. They decided they couldn't manage doing what needed to be done from an infrastructure perspective, and so they gave the funds basically back. So those funds are now back in the kitty, so to speak. But if you remember a couple of months ago, this group recommended to the board accepted the law enforcement foundation plane project. So that was bumped up to $1 million a year for 5 years. So this is the first million is listed in there. And then Valiant Air Command got a grant that was in the 700. I don't remember the exact number. It was in the 700,000 range, and that got added to money that they already had in a project. So that's why there's 924 now. So those numbers are now corrected. Lori Wilson, we're pretty well done with that project. There's just a couple of final things that they're working on this year. That's why there's some budget in there, but that'll be all wrapped up hopefully. Probably.
Which page are you looking at?
I'm looking at page 16.
At the budget.
Yeah. Yeah. So that just kind of gives you a little bit about the capital facilities. So it has some of those projects in there. Other is also reserves. So the other is basically funds that are now going to be available as the next capital grant cycle comes around. So I'm aware right now of 2 projects that are going to be approaching the capital committee for funding. One is the Merritt Island Amphitheater is looking for some additional funding. They ran over budget on their constructions. I don't know what that number is going to be, but that's going to come back asking. I've heard the lighthouse. If you remember the Head Canaveral Lighthouse, they're still wanting to build another little keeper's cottage like they built the first time. So I've heard they're noodling about that. The one we can't get to. The one that's behind the gate, yes. And then speaking of behind the gate, the Space Force Historical Society is interested in building a facility that will bring a lot of their rockets and things that they have behind the gate in front of the gate, and doing a pretty big project on about 40 acres of Air Force land that sits right outside the Space Force gate, and is open to is accessible to the public. No, this is the Canaveral. Yeah. So if you are familiar with the Sands History Center, it's a little, very small building that sits outside the gate. That property is actually, there's 40 acres on that property, and they're very interested in doing something. Apparently they have support of the Space Force and others, so. Well, I'm sure the captain would love to have it, but it's not his land. It's Air Force land, so yeah, it's not land they can access. So anyway, that's what I know. we'll see. I'm sure there'll be others coming out as we get closer to that time. Other than that, not a whole lot to talk about. Cultural, I will admit this is on now page 17 on cultural. So as you're aware, the board has moved $935,000 out of the cultural fund. It's going to flow through the marketing fund and go directly into the ocean rescue for lifeguards. That's a recurring event unless the board takes action. So I don't know for 24, 25 if we're going to have cultural grants, CCA contract, all of those things that we do out of the cultural committee. I don't know, what's going to happen with that because we use this year, the funds that we use this year to pay for the cultural support grants, the BCA contract, and major event grants that we're going to be talking about in a minute. We use carry forward funds to pay for all of that. So that was a one-time source of funds, and then basically that's going to be gone. So we'll see when we get to that time of the year, probably in March, April, we'll probably have some conversations about it. But that's about it. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Very good. Thank you. If you want me to roll into marketing, just so everybody knows, we're in the middle of our fall campaign. If you recall, the Countdown Creative we have presented here, several months back. That's the campaign that's running right now. It's about a $1.2 million campaign that's running in all of our major markets. I'd like to introduce Laura Beebe, who is our marketing director. She just started 3 weeks ago, so she's our new face in the crowd and will be jumping in and helping with all of our marketing activities. In the meantime, you may also have been tracking on the marketing plan, has been approved 5-0 by the board, and the marketing plan is defined a split between sort of the 5 districts, if you will, and District 2 is receiving 50% of the budget. We're in the process of working with some of the folks at the Cocoa Beach Hotel Association and getting some feedback and input on media buying and creative for sort of that portion of the funding. And so we're working through that now with a plan of launching a campaign in January that will be very District 2, which is Cocoa Beach and the Fork and Apple focus. So that's kind of just the update on the marketing front. Next, I'm going to let Cassandra go.
Okay. All right, culture. Starting on page 21 of your topic, is the culture for the new event grant that we did. We pulled up that you have the final grant for it. And if you have the chance to look through your packet, you would see that we have the guidelines that we went through and the board was cleaned up last year. So the amount, items 1, 2, and 3 under on Cocoa Beach regards Renaissance Fair and Space Coast State Fair. You see the amount of funding there, $50,000, $25,000, and $25,000. They all 4 days each, and then 4. So I am looking for a motion in a second to accept these grants as they are written as the country.
You would be the motion coming from the committee.
Coming from the committee, the motion then is to accept these grants with the name and go to the second.
We'll go all over the applications, and while there's one for them. Like to big events. Anybody want to censure a motion? A second?
So is there ever anything you do with the possibility for this that ever thought?
Well, it depends on who you ask. And I would profit this.
You know, if somebody's not making some money, put it in a year's worth of effort, you're not gonna have that. So, that's what I think about that. I know the couple of these budget shows. That's what a little bit of my own water numbers, essentially, I'll say that's the zero. Quite well, $300,000. And it's only chance again to fair, if it was profitable. And so, and they're a for-profit business.
And that's allowed, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. On the major, it's not like the cultural support grants where they have to be 501c3s. The major events can totally be, for-profit businesses. So, the service should be taken into consideration.
As long as we're bringing them there.
So, the very least, imagine that for the basically, you know, the whole year, and it's down, you know. Unless it was like,
It's just a word of comment, the zoo is a nonprofit, we always want to be a profit.
right, well, not, you know, profits can be consumed in salaries and everything else, so, they're non-profit, a lot of their profit. But, you know, these things obviously have a huge economic impact, we're gonna give. What occurred to me in looking at the sports grants, or all of that as well, the ratio of attendance to dollars received is huge. Thunder Pebble Beach might have 100,000 people, $1,000, and then you bring in, what is one of the sports grants, and bring in like, you know, it would be like $2,000, but these programs have all been very thoroughly vetted by our committee, and these and looked over year in and year out by the commission, so we can change now. Any other questions before we get that second?
I do have a question. And this is really not doing my due diligence. What's the required percentage of out, is it based on?
It's based on total attendance, there has to be a minimum of 25,000 attendees.
What required percentage of out?
I don't believe the guidelines dictate particular percentage, but they all had a pretty good percentage of out of county, if I'm not mistaken.
And do we require them to track that?
We track it. Yeah, that's what one of the things we do there. 25% of total attendees must be from out of county. So they have to hit 25,000 and then at least 25%, which I think Thunder is way over that. I'm not sure what the others were, but.
And you will.
But we track it, right?
I think that's a core responsibility.
Say this, you know, we're gonna look at this again next year and the year after. If you just look at media impressions with Thunder, even nobody showed up. Oh, it was just a live event. It's worth it. Yeah, because it's got TV coverage attached to it.
Thunder is a regional, no question in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. It's when new ones come on board, I want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, just because they're new, we're not familiar, that they're drawing them out of the county.
I know the Powerball racing is pretty big, we're gonna go to it. The one that they run at the end of the season, that have one whatever, they go all the way on the wall, the TV exposure is huge. But I was impressed with that whole slide deck for Thunder on the Beach, where all the media outlets that cover this sport. But anyway, yeah. All right. Still waiting for a second. Okay, there we go. We have a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. Thank you very much, Andrew, for all of our work. So the next one is capital. We pretty much talked through capital. If we want to go to beach, I have on page, holding my paper, and it's on page 141. This committee had asked last time if I would take a stab at looking at the budget and seeing where we are. The beach, I am going to caveat time, we still have a lot of activity going on with the Army Corps doing a nearly $50 million project, about a $24 million project being finished up on the South Beaches. So these numbers are, I guess what I would say is they are the best numbers we have at this moment, but there's certainly potential for change. But I did want to point out a couple of things, and I put it in what I did is I put this in the format of what our normal budget is in, but I changed the numbers based on the best data that we have at the moment and projections that I wanted to do, because all of our budget was based on 27 million, and each gets 25% of that. So you'll notice the 6.5 million is actually not 25% of 27 million, it's 25% of 26 million, just being, conservative, so we can kind of work off of the most conservative numbers and make decisions based on, being fiscally responsible. So that would generate, with the balance forward, that would generate about 23.5 million in revenue, that's the top part. Then looking down at the bottom part, I highlighted, if you notice, I was able to put 8 million back into the reserves based on not having to come out of pocket for the mid-reach project. The Army Corps did not ask us for that match. Now, that doesn't mean we're completely off the hook, so I did leave some money in the mid-reach project line item. It's about 5 under the expenses section. It's about 5 lines down. It's the other contracted services mid-reach project is 1.8 million. The reason I did that is because they told us as we're not going to ask for a match, but if we run over budget, we may come back and ask later. So I just want to make sure we have some funding in there because, our contract with them, it's a 50-year contract, it basically says whenever they ask for money, we gotta be able to come to the table with it. So I'd rather just leave it in there. Otherwise, I would have put it down in the reserve, but I'd rather not do that at this time. As far as all the other numbers in there, most of those top 4 lines are South Beach related. Those are commitments that we already made a year and a half ago when we got all those storms. And they're going to be 87.5% FEMA reimbursable. And we believe we'll get those funds. Obviously, it takes 2 to 3 years to get reimbursed by FEMA, but that'll be a big chunk of it. And then Mike shared with me, he's on if there's any questions for him, but he shared with me that he thinks that we may be able to get even more of the remaining 12.5% from the state, from grants that we can file with the state. So it's very possible that for that full amount of money that we put into the South Beaches, we may get close to fully reimbursed. May not be 100%, but it'd be pretty darn close, which would be nice, and that would happen probably in the next 2 to 3 years. So that would be good because by then we'll be, ready for new projects and we'll need more funding for those. Other than that, the other thing in here, just if you're wondering why in this fiscal year there's $1 million in the IRL grant line item, the reason is because we had almost every grant recipient from last year ask for an extension to September 30th of 24 for their projects. They all were behind on their projects. They all asked for extensions. They were granted that by the TDC and the board. Gave them that, so I needed to put money in there because we're going to be getting, as we go through this year, we'll be getting asked, for reimbursements, and we'll be able to give them those reimbursements. Now, the question I think Tom had asked or was going to ask was regarding next year's IRL grant program, and then certainly I think, come early next year, we could probably have a conversation about that. Should we, do that program again for the 24-25 fiscal year? That obviously would be a recommendation that this advisory council could give to the board, and then we, see what the board would do. I'm not sure where the board will be on that. I know in the past the board has been pretty supportive of those, but we've got some new members, so I don't know if I can really speak, on where they'll be on that particular topic. So other than that, the rest of the items in here are pretty I will note the UCF contract, that's their turtle monitoring. The reason it's so high, it should be half of that. The reason it's so high is because they had a lot of work to do for us for the South Beaches, because we were trying to, prep, if you remember, there was this whole sargassum issue, and we were concerned about what would happen if we got, seaweed again, or whatever you wanted to call it, sargassum again, it's harder to say. And so what we needed to do in order to be prepared for it is we needed to do turtle monitoring, not only in the South Beaches, but all up and down the mid-reach as well. And so they had a lot of increased costs, but I think they had some staffing issues, weren't able to get all the bills into us. So some of these are bills we're getting now. So we just carried forward about $170,000 in turtle monitoring, and we'll have another $170,000 in turtle monitoring this year, mostly because there's all these big projects going on. So they are responsible not only for monitoring, but if they have to move nets, they are the ones that would actually be able to, they have a license to move the nets out of the way of equipment and that type of thing. So that's why it's a little higher than it normally would be.
Placeholder?
It's a pretty solid placeholder, because there's some lawsuits involved, I'm not allowed to go into super detail, but the issue, is, and there's been stories about it in the paper, but, there are some landowners that, have basically tried to block, the county from, these major projects. The county just won the suit, but there's still a remittance that has to be paid, and then attorney's fees as a result of that. And then there's, we've been told now that there are appeals that will be happening, so there'll be more attorney's fees. So the 1.1 covers us for payment of easements for some of these people, and then attorney's fees, legal fees for all of that. So that is what that number is. So, I mean, I think the positive takeaway is, because we didn't have to pay the Army for it, because they were able to get extra funding from FEMA themselves, it puts $8 million, maybe a little bit more back in the kitty, if you will. Probably, if I were to throw in the 1.8 million from the mid-reach project, it'd be 9.8 million back in. If you remember, we took 10 million out last year, so it pretty much reimburses where we were last year. From the ARPA funds? So the ARPA funds had to be spent directly. So the ARPA funds were used to pay for South Beaches. It was a $24 million project, 6.5 was part of that, and then the rest came from us. So those ARPA funds had to be paid directly to that project. We never saw that money. It never came into our funds. It was just paid for directly out of the ARPA funds.
Will those be reimbursed to the ARPA funds?
When we get all of the reimbursement back, then technically the county will want $6 million back in. Good question.
So we have been deeply worried about this number. We're no longer deeply worried about this number.
I'm
One storm away from being back.
Yeah, I would say exactly. I mean, we're a storm or two away from worrying again, but yeah, at least for the moment, I think, looked like knockwood, we had a pretty good year this year. We didn't have any major events that caused us to have to, do anything beyond what we were already planning on doing. So if we have another good year next year, great. If we don't, then we'll be right back where we started with looking at the reserves. So
Yeah, so I'm clear. If we had another good year next year, then our reserve would potentially go up to 16 million.
No, it wouldn't be that much. Your revenue is about $6.5 million a year. So
I think there's a periodic maintenance stuff.
yeah, there's several million in maintenance. So,
I guess I'm.
but you'd probably have $4 or $5 more million next year that you could add to the reserve potentially. But then remember, you know, we do these projects every 3-4 years, so, you know, I think the good news is that I'm gonna go back. I'm on version, I think, 15 or 16 of the 50-year plan. I'm gonna redo that but I want the numbers to settle a little bit because, you know, $1 million could really impact when you're doing a 50-year projection. $1 million now affects, you know, 20 years from now, it's a lot more than that. So, but my thought is if we get the FEMA funds reimbursed, like what we talked about in 2 or 3 years, and then we have another big, you know, we'll have another big mid-reach project. We may have some other South Beaches projects we need to do. We should be okay to pay for those, at least in the next cycle, right? So we're in one cycle where we're paying for damages, you know, from storms a year ago. We've got a major project going on in the mid-reach, and that'll be done. But then in 3 or 4 years, we'll be right back having to do those things again, unless there's a storm in between now and then. And you know, but I think the likelihood is always a possibility with the way, you know, climate change and everything else going on right now. You know, it's hard to say we're going to be fine, you know, but at least we have some money back in the pot, you know.
So the 50-year plan will give us some ideal reserve numbers. We think that we'd like to be at.
It will, but I mean, the thing I always say about the 50-year plan is like every time I do it, something happens and it changes, you know, it changes it. And 20 years down the road, you know, who knows what that, I mean, that crystal ball is so hard to really read because, but yes, it does. It gives you kind of a template to look at and say, okay, here's where we might be in 10, 15, 20 years. But, you know, one bad year can mess all of that up.
Important thing is to look 4 or 5 years.
Right, that's the cycle.
One storm
Yeah.
is $24 million in damage. I don't know if that puts it back to where it was or better.
Hopefully
Look at
better,
that,
hopefully
$24
better.
million for one storm.
Yeah.
You don't,
That's the
and
number.
then now we got full reimbursement. We were expecting less.
Right.
We still would have needed 5 to 10, $8 million out of that 24.
Right.
So it's for 2 that we're getting it back. That doesn't mean that the Army Corps or FEMA are gonna reimburse it.
So that's the horizon. We're really looking 4 to 5 years out. And big storms have hit us for 24, of which theoretically we're to be responsible. We cash flow up front, and then we can be responsible for what percentage again?
12.5 usually if you don't get all of FEMA. If you don't get the FEMA 87.5, then it's 12.5.
But the point that I keep hammering, and Mike will bring up, the contract with the Army Corps, the contract with FEMA, that says that if we don't do the annual or.
You gotta do the maintenance. Yeah.
If we stop doing that because we're at 0, even if they're gonna reimburse us for all the storm damage, then they don't come and do anything.
Right. And talk to Volusia County because they, you know, they're a perfect example of what happens when you don't do the maintenance. They've never had a program like we've had. And so they got hammered. I mean, they got really hammered. I think they're getting some funds, but there was a lot of reluctance on the Fed's part to pay for a lot of the damages that they received because they use seawalls instead of using dunes and using more of a natural barrier. And so, you know, they actually came to us. I mean, Mike has been talking with them. They came to us and said, hey, what can we, you know, do to try to, you know, help ourselves in the future? And so they're looking at our program as a model of that. But yeah, they really got hurt because of that.
Chairman, I think it's also, if we don't do it, we can lose it completely.
Yeah, they could pull the whole contract.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, you didn't do it this year, we get you next year. No, once you miss it, you're out.
So we have maintenance responsibility. Our bottom line is we have maintenance responsibility plus periodic storm responsibility.
You have to have millions and millions of dollars for maintenance, and then you have to be ready to have your share of maybe so on, and then if you're lucky, you get paid back.
Yeah.
But if you don't have either, you get nothing.
Yeah. And the, you know, if we had not had the $6.5 million ARPA funds, we'd be scrambling around looking for $6.5 million. So we would have to borrow it from somewhere because you're required to, you know, do that work. So,
And so, when you have a $600 million over 10 years, most likely reduced sales tax program, which we can't spend timely for permitting and project feasibility studies, that we intend to pay $1 million in order to ensure that we get hundreds of millions of dollars. That is bad policy. I got it in there right at the end.
You're gonna make me.
Nicely done.
Good segue.
We did, we covered each. Yep.
Sports.
Other pages 142 and 143, I believe we met on November 8th. And, we did have a forum, but we did have three people that were speaking of individual functions. So as a committee, we did vote on the first five you see there. We voted to approve those, and then the other three were not informed of those that were there recommended to approve all of them. There were 9 applicants in the beginning, and we ended up only with 8. One didn't pass the scoring. And, so I would like to make a motion on behalf of the sports committee to approve, as page 142 has been listed.
Because his daughter or son plays soccer.
I didn't speak to the county attorney.
Yeah, I told her,
I had on the sideline, that's my boy.
yeah, he was being a little cautious.
Overly.
And, in speaking with the county attorney's office after our meeting, there was still some confusion about whether or not we even had a quorum where we could move forward on it. Then Peter he talked, and we found out we were good.
Yours to the benefit excludes staying on the sideline and watching a 4-year-old daughter play soccer.
I would say there was a very high threshold that, you know, he was not violating anything, but he was being a little overly conservative, yeah.
None of us wanted to go to jail, so we're very cautious.
He is, what a great chief.
He was protecting the business. So before there's a second, I just also want to say, one of the things that changed with this cycle, we had brought a new guidelines to the CDC and the board, and basically what we're paying is $15 a room night. So what used to happen with the sports committee was there was always sort of a little bit of a jockeying and negotiating. The committee would make a recommendation about what the ultimate award should be. Now it's pretty well stated in the guidelines, so it makes it a little simpler and hopefully more straightforward for everyone. That it's $15 a room night. If you don't deliver, it's still in the guidelines. If you don't deliver the full number of room nights, then you get your reimbursement is reduced by the percentage that you're below. So, you know, if they say 1,000 and they bring 800, they only get 80% of the grant. So that's how these grants work.
And you're honoring that by, or you're not.
No, we get, you know, we have to get room night reports. So, yeah, we're getting something that we can verify. Yeah.
All right, committee made the motion. Still looking for, we have a second from John. To the punch, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All unanimous votes, here and now, motion passes. Great work. Good job. Public comment. Any public comments? There you go. Happy Thanksgiving, great. All right, Commissioner for reports. Tina, Matt, Don, Christie. Nothing other than Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Keith.
Just the people afterwards, if it's not raining, it's like to see the progress after the loop, partially TV funded, we would love to share.
Okay. Can we shake paws with the lion?
You know, I will tell you no, but in the aquarium plans, you can say patty cake with a knocker.
Ah, there you go. All right. Thank you, sir. Just again, happy Thanksgiving and just an acknowledgement for Commissioner Pritchett for chairing this year. then for vice chairing this year, and stepping in a couple of times, and the rest of the committee, thank you for serving on the committee. It's been a fun and interesting year. Hopefully, enjoy the holidays, and I think everybody should be back in January. I don't know for a fact, but that'll be up to the new chair of the board. On some of the positions, some of you are out to multi-year, and some got multi-year, so keep that multi-year. Wayne, I think you're multi-year, so yeah. So we'll see a lot of familiar faces hopefully in January. We'll be back at it. Be thinking about your committee appointees. If you like them, don't like them, want to switch them out, you'll have that opportunity after the January meeting convenes. Then there'll be that month between January and February where you can pick your new committee members, and then we'll have the committee will vote on it in February. And then we'll be back with committee meetings in March and April. Excellent. Sure. Thank you. Excellent.